Hey, I want to welcome everybody this morning. We've got actually probably one of the more important ones, and we'll definitely have this up on the YouTube channel. Just as you look in every year and trying to remember what paperwork to do and what all things you have to be done, this is actually going to be a very, very good one. Fred's put a lot of time and effort into this thing, and it's going to help us develop kind of a timeline and needs for a whole season. And so it's probably, like I said, every year we probably should go over it, and couldn't think of a better guy to get it. Without further ado, Fred Kaiser, it's all yours, man.
Thanks, Warren. I appreciate it. For me, what this really boils down to is the stuff that I keep forgetting about every single year. So let's see here. Yeah, so it's every year I've got my own little checklist that I keep by my desk, and it's stuff that I'm at some point in the year I forget. So I have it broken down not by month, but I do a preseason, in-season, postseason, and then summer. Brief overview, just a couple of the changes, obviously, that we have coming up for the school year with rule changes and things like that. And then hopefully you all are able to read through the rest of that. Just as preseason, in-season, awards, postseason, coaching organizations, summer, and then Q&A. So big one for this year, and this is as of now. This is a daily changing thing, but right now our calendar says that we can start our after-school scrimmages or our after-school practices November 30th. That's the first Monday after Thanksgiving break, like it is every year, and then scrimmages start 10 days later. This year and last year, that was a change from previous times when we had to wait until after Christmas break or during Christmas break to start working on those. So just be aware of those. I've got little asterisks by both of those because those are up for change right now. Obviously, their UIL is looking at dates for just about everything. So hopefully it stays put and we'll be good to go. If not, make sure you're on the UIL website. Another big rule change here that didn't go through last year is the goal kick rule. Goal kick no longer needs to leave the box. Now, reading through the rule, players have to be outside the box when taken, but as soon as the ball rolls, they're able to come in and start stealing it again. So make sure you're looking up your rule changes for NFHS. Also, in addition to that, there's been a whole bunch of drop ball additions or changes to how drop balls function, exactly where it'll be at. I'm not sure if they changed the number of players, but they did a whole bunch of addendums to the drop ball this year. So that's just something that you need to be aware of. Last year when they brought the drop ball back, it's unlimited players were allowed to go in for that. So you could have 11v11 or 12v12. So just be aware that rule is still in place. For me, obviously, a lot of us get new assistants every year or every other year. I'm fortunate this year, for the first time in a couple of years, we'll all have the same assistants. My goal for my assistants is when I hire them, I want to have them prepared to take over for my job within 2 to 3 years, just depending on their development speed. A lot of that is your paperwork that comes with being a head coach, and that can be a big pain in the butt, and we'll go over some of those forms here obviously in a moment. But you need to make sure that your assistants are prepared for stuff, especially if you have new assistants, just a lot of what the expectations are and things like that. And then obviously if you're an assistant, you need to learn what you can. Some of the best advice that I got from one of my first head coaches I worked for is actually a football head coach, was you're going to see me do a lot of things that you like, and you're going to see me do probably even more things that I do that you don't like. Remember that. Remember the things that you see other people doing and that you don't want to be a part of your program, because that's going to be just as important as seeing good ideas. So take those away. And again, assistants take initiative to help out head coaches. They do have a pretty tenuous job. Practicing what you preach to players. I mean, it's just one of those basic things like be on time, be prepared. That can go a long way towards lifestyle choices and things like that. But if you're doing something and you're not holding the same expectation for the players, or vice versa, you're not holding the same expectation for your coaches, that can be an issue for the players. For me, one of those things is, right now I have facial hair. In our district, the players are not allowed to have facial hair. So during the season, even though I'm allowed to grow a mustache, I'd look terrible with one, so I wouldn't do it anyway. But I'll be clean shaven and I'll have my hair cut the way that the players are supposed to have it, and I'll keep my tattoos covered and things like that. So the things that we expect the players to do during the season, even though I may not necessarily have to do that as a coach. I think they do appreciate that, I go through the same things that they do. For the be a learner yourself, most of you guys, well, all of you guys who are on right now, you're currently doing that. You're trying to learn and better yourself. I mean, this can go anything from taking United Soccer Coaches diplomas, USSF licenses, things like that, or just talking with other people, talking with other coaches, just to learn more about the craft. We expect the players to pay attention to learn. We need to be doing the same thing. Your big thing with your UIL forms, obviously, is know your dates. With your varsity eligibility form, that has to be signed off by your admin before you're allowed to, before you're supposed to be doing your scrimmages and your games. So once you already have your team set for the varsity things, you need to get that taken care of in terms of pushing that up the chain, because the chain needs to sign off on that. You don't want to go into your scrimmages or your first games on January 2nd this year and not have your forms signed off, because you can get in a lot of trouble for that. Obviously, your PAPFs for your previous athletic participation form is what that is. Those can take a while to get done. If you have a player that's coming into your program that's new from anywhere in the United States, Canada, or Mexico, that's what the PAPF is for. So, I've had some players coming from Mexico and then trying to get that form signed off. It can be difficult. Even other states that are kind of not really respectful of your time, and it takes some time for follow-up. So generally what I do for those, regardless of the player, if I see them as a varsity or a JV player, we'll go through that. I'll sit down with mom and dad or parent legal guardian and go through the PAPF with the parents, so that way they have fewer questions, and help them fill that out, since we're the expert on that one. The parents don't really understand some of that stuff. But that can be a very straightforward, very simple process. If I were to send something to Warren, I'm sure I'd have it back within a day or two. However, if I send that out to somebody in Timbuktu, California, or Oregon that doesn't have access to a fax machine, or they're not in school, that's one of those things that can take a long time. So be aware of that one. With the exchange students, if you have exchange students, the only time you need this form, again, is for players who you want to play varsity. Last time I filled one of them out, I think it was $150 non-refundable. And that is a pain in the butt waiver to get done. Generally, UIL, from what I've seen, they decline those until you make a phone call and call them back. They'll find there'll be some small reason or some small thing in the form where they'll decline that. So just be aware of that. Your other waivers, this is for kind of special education kids, the players who are 19, fifth year of eligibility. Kind of things that are almost always declined by UIL, but be aware that there are a lot of other waivers out there for odd circumstances. And, as coaches, the earlier you start those things, the better. Eligibility, that was a big one for me this year. We switched from a 6-week calendar to a 9-week calendar this year, so I had a lot of learning to do on that one. So depending on what your district does, I mean, there's times there's grading periods you need to be hyper aware of. And then also know that during breaks that all your players are eligible, like during the Christmas break or during spring break, your players are all eligible regardless of if they failed a class or not. That's a decision you need to make as a coach. Generally for me, if a player's not eligible grade-wise, even if spring break comes up or Christmas break comes up, I still bench that kid. But that's me personally. And then finally on this one, your time allotted per week, we're blessed to have block scheduling. So we actually get 450 minutes a week with our kids. It's an hour and a half, 5 days a week. We're not allowed to use all of that. UIL limits it to 300 minutes per week. So just make sure you're paying attention to those things. And then I have on here no after school and before school workouts prior to preseason, but I'm pretty sure, and I need to talk with Jimmy about this one, or he may be able to chime in, or someone who does know about this. I think UIL is looking at changing that, where we're allowed to do weight training outside of the school day with our players, even when we're not in season, because of everything that's happened. I'm not 100% sure on that one, and if someone wants to speak up on that one a little bit later, please feel free to do. But that's something that we can definitely take advantage of as coaches, is that having our weight training done before, and then not having to utilize class time for that too. For tryouts, I generally have 2 tryouts during the year. We're fortunate enough to where we're allowed to hold a tryout the first week of the year. We usually have between 70 and 130 players. It really just depends on the year that try out. In a typical year, we'll run 3 teams, but sometimes down to 2. So for us, we'll run a tryout that first week. Generally, we know, the players who have already, played varsity last year, who are some of our top JV players. I might give them a different role. So that way, if we got 30 incoming freshmen and 10 transfer students, people I need to have a look at. That's generally what I do with that first week is we gather their paperwork as quickly as we can, which means prior to the summer being over with. And then that way, day one, day two, we can go straight into a tryout. Just because if you're like a lot of coaches, it might just be you by yourself during a class period with 50 kids. That's difficult. You're not going to get that good of training done then. But if you still have 70, if you still have, another 30, 40, 50 kids who are trying out, you kind of want to weed out those ones that you can, at least the drill killers at the beginning. So generally what I'll do is I'll have that first tryout during the first week of school. We'll cut some of the, we'll make a list of the players who we know have already made it. Once that list hits about 55 or 60, I'm fortunate enough to have a second coach with me during my period. But once that list hits 55 or 60, we look really hard at all those other players. And what we'll tell a lot of those players is, hey, we have a limited number of spots available. We have a limited number of coaches during the period. We saw that you really needed to work on X, Y, Z, generally, spacing, timing, first touch, things like that. Why don't you come back to our second tryout? And for that, we do our second tryout in November after Thanksgiving break, once the after school season starts. And we'll run another tryout generally from that Monday till Wednesday or Monday till Thursday after school. And that way that just, that lowers our numbers that we have in the class during the beginning of the year, so we can get better development from our players during that time period. But this one also keeps a lot of headaches off me from parents when we make that cut in the beginning of the year, because, we'll get those phone calls. It's like, well, you only saw little Timmy or you only saw Susie for 4 days. That doesn't really seem like a fair tryout. And we'll be like, well, you could be. Now, in all honesty, most of us know within about the first 10 seconds that a kid's involved, whether or not they're, we can place them pretty quickly on the at least cut or keep list, let alone varsity, JV, freshman team. So, but that way, to placate the parents a bit, what I tell them is like, I could have been 100% wrong. You might be 100% right. We told little Johnny, we told little Susie what he needed to work on or what she needed to work on. We're going to offer them another look. We're going to offer them another 4 or 5 days. Typically what we've done in the past, since we've been allowed to work with our players, especially last summer or the summer, but this summer is a little bit up in the air, depending on the district. We've told those players, hey, coming and showing up for our summer practices, that's not mandatory, but if we're able to see you for another 10, 12, 14 days versus just the 4 that we have at the beginning, you also get higher numbers of participation. You're also able to have a better look at the players there too. But like I said, we do the tryout generally the first week of school, and then we'll hold the second after school tryout. Big ones here with the player-parent communication. And for those of you who didn't have the opportunity, last week, Coach Shipman did a great presentation on Sports U, and I have Remind 101 on there, but that's what the Sports U is. If you go to YouTube and you go to Tasco Soccer, that's already up there. I saw that today. I was able to rewatch that today. That's really, really good for communication with your parents and your players. At this point in time, I really don't believe you can over communicate with your parents, because there's always going to be that one that says, I didn't get this email. How come this? How come that? We didn't receive this. So I'm at the point now where it's, back in the old days, I might send out a email once a week, or, I send out information one time and players say they didn't get it or parents say they didn't get it. I'm like, well, sorry, you're responsible for your email. Yes, they are. But in reality, I'm also responsible for getting the message across. It's one of those things, it's not what I say, it's what they hear. So I'm kind of big into the hyper communication when it comes to that, sending out those frequent emails. Also, setting up social media accounts. It's a great time if you don't already have them for your teams. I'm not the hugest fan of social media, but we do have a Twitter account for our soccer program, and I'm not the best with it. So I kind of that's one of those things that I turn over to my assistants, so that they're able to take care of that kind of stuff. Next one on there, it says Google form for input from players and parents. I send out a Google form, and it's basically the same thing, but I'll send it out several times during the year, especially at the beginning of the year. After we've had that first cut, I'll send out a form. In that form, first of all, it has like players' club information. You know, who do you play club? What club do you play for? What's your team? What's your coach? What's your coach's phone number? Later on, I'll talk about talking with the club coaches, but that's just so you can build relationships there. But also on this, I ask questions of parents, because I ask the parents to fill out a separate form from the player of what are your expectations from the program? What do you as a parent hope to get out of this? What do you hope your child gets out of this? And then the big one is, what else would you like to tell us about your son or about your family situation that might help us, you know, get to know him better? And that's the time where parents really like to vent on stuff. Parents really like to have, from what I've seen, at least our parents really like to have a say in how things go. This gives them an opportunity to voice their opinion right at the beginning of the year of what their expectations are. So that way, one, it gives them that chance to say their piece. But I've also found that it helps me find out who I think my high maintenance parents are going to be, just so I'm kind of aware of that. But it's also lessened a lot of the communication I get from parents we really expected that this was going to happen, but this hasn't been happening. It gives me an opportunity to understand what the parents' perspective is in case we may have to make some modifications to how we're doing some things. If we have 90% of our parents saying, you know, the number one thing we want you teaching our kid is this, well, that's kind of our job then. You know, yes, the soccer is a big role, but, do they want us teaching their kids about leadership capabilities or, or friendships or social media, things like that. And something that we may not have thought about. So I send that out at the beginning of the year, again, after the first tryout. I also do it during as we're about to kick off the season. I'll do a mid-season, I'll do a postseason too. So I do the evaluations with the players, but I also like to get the parent input on that one, just so we can kind of see how we're doing. Final thing on this slide that my district's implemented are home visits. In theory, we're supposed to be visiting a home of every player every year. When you have 70 players and 2 coaches, that's just virtually impossible to do. Plus, a lot of these times, I've been at my school, fortunately, for a while. I'm on my 3rd or 4th kid, or now I'm on the children of children that I've coached, of kids I've coached before. So I may have already built that relationship for a lot of them. Generally, what I will do, though, is I'll do these home visits with the incoming freshmen who have made the team, just so what I use that as, and the reason we do it in their home is that's kind of their home field where they're going to be more comfortable. You can always meet with parents at school or at a Starbucks or something like that, but at home, that's their territory where they feel comfortable, and they may feel comfortable asking you more questions. But it also gives us the opportunity to talk with the freshman parents, introduce them to the program, introduce them to the expectations, and the big thing, obviously, with freshmen or new players to soccer, especially on the male side, is your son might be one of the best players for his age group, but realize that he's 14 years old and he's going to be going as an 18-year-old man who's got 4 years of development, who's also the best player for his age group, and that is why your son is playing on the freshman team and is not a starter on varsity. There are always exceptions to that rule, as we tell our parents. Almost every year we've had a freshman who's made varsity, but a lot of the times they're either on the freshman team or the JV, depending on how we have things broken up. But it gives us an opportunity to explain one-on-one to the parents why things are the way they are, answering the questions, and just kind of give them an added comfort level on that. Also during the preseason, like I said, with the with the form that I sent out to the players, this is a big one for me, is contacting the club coaches. The relationship between high school and clubs changed a lot in Texas since I started coaching, and I'm sure with Warren and a lot of the other coaches who have been doing it longer in Texas than I have, you've seen even more drastic changes. But even when I got here, a lot of times it was a football coach that was a soccer coach. So honestly, they didn't know too much about it. A lot of whistles during drills and stuff like that. Whistles and jumping jacks is what I used to see a lot of. And so just the coaching that the players were getting in the past, wasn't as high caliber as what they were getting with clubs. Well, that's shifted a lot. Nowadays, depending on what school you're at, they're going to ask you about your licenses and your background, and just making sure that you essentially are a professional coach, in addition to being a professional teacher. So we actually know what we're doing nowadays. And one thing I've done personally to bridge the gap between high school and club coaches, and this way I have fewer problems with my club coaches, is I'll call them. As a matter of fact, right now, one of the coaches, he has 9 of my players, so that play all on one team. So we talk probably once every other week, especially now since he can practice with them and I'm really limited in what we can do. I'll call him up and say, hey, these players that are currently in our program, where do you have them playing? Where do you see them playing? Where, what are some things that we can do to help you out? We have access to trainers and training rooms. We have access to weight rooms. We have access to film. A lot of those clubs still don't have access to those types of things. So there's things that we can do that they can't. I also talk with the club coaches and kind of explain what my expectations are during club season for players versus what it is for during high school season. During club season, I tell my players, I need your club schedule as quickly as you can get it to me. So that way I know who's got big, it's like, oh, well, we're playing the Texans this weekend, or we're playing FC Dallas or Celtic or whomever we're playing. Little Timmy may need to rest. Or I have a game on a Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of this week, or I have a game, I have an upcoming tournament. Well, how those players practice during the week, for me personally, is going to be different. If I've got a player who's coming off of a big tournament where they played 6 games in 4 days, I'm probably going to sit them and go over rest and recovery, as opposed to implementing them into a lot of the sessions that we're going to be doing, just because that's what the player needs. They don't need to get burnt out. One thing that I do tell the coaches is, if the player does not get me their schedule, the expectation is they're practicing that day. If they didn't care enough to give me their schedule, I'm sorry, I don't care enough to give you the day off. That's one of those mutual respect type things that we're trying to teach the players. And so, talking with the club coaches about that kind of stuff and big dates has really helped out with, just the relationship between the club's coach and I, but also what kind of tournaments, because I know there's, if you look January through March, there's going to be a different showcase tournament every weekend. And kind of like I tell my parents is, if the club coach is taking your kid to Vegas as a freshman, you're pretty much paying for that club coach to go to Vegas. That's really the only point of that one. But there are different tournaments and there are different showcases that are beneficial for the players when it gets to college time. And so a lot of times what will happen is, like the Vegas tournament for the juniors, or Disney or something like that for juniors and seniors. I'll talk with the coaches, and I might be able to talk them out of taking their freshman or sophomore to those tournaments. So I do see here, so I'm going to step aside here real quick. It says, do you have a particular way that the athletes share their club schedules with you? And do you have any rules in advance on how you like to receive them? Yes. So I like them emailed to me, but I also like a hard copy. And also I like the player to actually give me the schedule, as opposed to mom or dad. If mom or dad send me the schedule, that's great. But we're also trying, these kids most of my kids are coming from middle school. Most of the players who have played for me for several times, or for several years, they know what the expectation is, although we reiterate it, especially for the freshmen. No, they're used to their parents doing everything for them. So we're trying to build that sense of responsibility and self-advocacy. So I ask that the players email it and print it off. That way, I'm able to have a look at that. During the club season, let me rephrase that. During the high school season, my expectation is that the players are playing for us. What I do tell a lot of the parents is, if your club coach can't get that kid what they promised you in 9 months, the 3 months that I have, where they're now taking those kids to X, Y, and Z showcase, that's wasted time. They should have been able to do it, because I can give you what I told you I was going to give you within 3 months. So when it comes to that, when it comes to in season, if players miss one of my games, especially a district game or a playoff game as a result of something going on with club, that's a big no-no. There's suspensions that are involved in that. I also have it where I tell the players, okay, you're going to miss. You need to get up in front of your teammates and explain to them why you chose your club over them. That's part of it. So the expectation for me is when we are in season, we are the priority. That being said, when club's in season, I work with those club coaches as much as I possibly can, and that might be sitting a kid out for a week during our preseason. Just because, one, I don't want to wear them up. Two, I want to build that relationship. And if I want those club coaches to respect my time, I think I should respect their time and what they're trying to do with those players as well. So that's kind of how my preaching on reaching out to club coaches. During the preseason, we go over our principles of play, our offense, our defense, our systems of play, different formations. It's one of those things that I don't think that the players should be. The first time they see a formation is in a game. It's like, oh shoot, they're really starting to hammer us, so we want to go from a 4-3-3 to a 4-5-1 or something like that. Well, have the players practice that before? If not, you're kind of setting them up for failure. I'll do that a lot. I'll do a lot of different systems also during scrimmages. We might run something in one half, and then, you know, the second half we run something completely opposite to it. Reason I do that is just to give them exposure. And I do tell the parents and I do tell the players, especially with the preseason, or especially with the scrimmages, but also into the preseason games that are not district games, we win or lose. Our goal is to prepare for district, because how we do in district is what's preparing us for playoffs. So that's kind of how I treat the systems of play there, is by introducing to as many as we can. On that note, it's like I grew up in the old school 4-3-3. That was what I was most familiar with. Well, guess what? You know, most of my club kids now are running a 4-4-2, and we haven't been able to run a 4-4-2 the last 3 years, because the 4-4-2 that my kids run, well, they're all center midfielders. They're all a 6 or an 8. Great. I have 9 8s on the field. They need to be used to playing different formations. Along with that is the numbering system. If I tell a kid, you know, hey, we're going to change the formations, but I really need you to play more of a 7 than I do as a 6. Well, they need to understand what that means. So most of the players, and I don't think they're taught this in club anymore, don't know the numbering system, and a lot of coaches don't know the numbering system either. It makes your life infinitely easier when you can do job descriptions based off of the numbering system and systems of play, because my 4-5, Warren's 4-5-1 might look like 2 totally different things, where I'm running with a 7 and 11 and he's running with 3 6s or whatever the heck he decides he wants to do, just what things are going to look like. But by having a numbering system, the players are able to understand that a little bit better, and also they're able to understand the systems of play a whole lot better. Obviously, I like to do game situations, playing man down, playing 2 men down, playing man up, you know, shootouts, PKs, however you know you're going to be ending your district play, corner kicks, set pieces, all those things. I try to do as many game simulations as we possibly can. And it's also, obviously, during the preseason, you want to set your player behavior expectations. They need to know what the expectations are, and they need to be told over and over and over again. I mean, there are times where I'll go to a junior who's heard it 5,000 times and be like, buddy, you're not a freshman anymore. We can't be doing this. The freshmen are looking at you. So just having those conversations early and often does help out. Again, preseason, the set pieces, I let the players come up with stuff. I mean, if there's something that they're doing in club, there is something that they saw on TV or, you know, in the Bundesliga or something like that they really enjoy and they really want to play, fine. I let them work on it. It gives them ownership. It lets them, you know, bring in ideas. Now, I have a couple things that, you know, a couple rules that I have on short corners and defending and things like that are kind of my non-negotiables on that. But, you know, if the players, if you have input, they'll work on it they'll work on it. And if it works, then shoot. I mean, you know, I just as a rule of thumb, I hate short corners. But that being said, my kids work on short corners. They're good at short corners. And I've got a team of pygmies that are 2 feet tall. Well, doing a standard corner where you launch the ball into a bunch of 2-foot players ain't going to work. So if the players, you know, getting their input on that, it gives them ownership and it gives us better results. Obviously, with your district, is a tie or do you go to PKs? Practicing PKs, how do you practice your PKs to kind of put to put a little bit more pressure on the players? That's one of those things where it's like, okay, and in practice, you know, everyone PKs just to practice them, but are you practicing with the same with the same level of intensity and the same level of pressure? So we try to bring things in to make that happen. You need to practice your game day routine, everything from like do you want your teams walking out in, you know, identical outfits in 2 lines? You know, what their pregame routine, their warm-ups, travel expectations. I know some coaches who are saying from the time we get on the bus till the time we get back on the bus, there are no phones out. Okay, you might want to explain to the players why you're doing that, because a lot of them like to listen to their music and all that fun stuff. But if that's the expectation, that's the expectation that needs to be laid out early. Again, with film, I don't really want to go through too much of that. Hopefully most of you have access to Huddle or something like that. But when I'm doing film sessions, I will look at stuff from last year, but I'm only doing, I mean, the classroom session is probably only going to be 5 to 7 minutes, because that's about what their attention span is. we're not going to sit through an entire 80-minute game and break it down one play by play by play by play, because the kids are just going to fall asleep or they're just not going to pay attention. But if there's a focus on something I want to do in practice that day, I want to talk about pressure cover balance, or I want to talk about penetration into the offensive third, I might bring up some clips from the past of where we've done a penetrating, or where we've done a crappy job of penetrating, where we've done a good job of defending, where we've done a crappy job of defending, just so they can see what the expectation is. We also film a lot of our practices too when we have managers, and that way we can see some of those things. Big thing is going to be your college prep as well. There are a lot of opportunities out there for players to play in college. Now, whether or not they're going to get money is a totally different story. But if they want to play in college and that is their dream and that's the only thing they care about, they don't care about their college major, it can be done. But what are you doing for that? There's lots of software out there. I know Sports Source puts out some good stuff. Intelligent has some things on that. But there's a lot of places that are putting out software nowadays where you can start digging into that type of stuff. I also invite college coaches to come talk with players. Fortunately, here we're in the Dallas Metroplex. We have a lot of D3, D2, and D1, one D1 program here. I'll invite those coaches in. I only get 300 minutes of practice, but 450 minutes a week of time with my players. Great time to bring in those college coaches. It gives them the opportunity to say, this is the expectation from my school. This is the type of player that we have. Also builds your credibility with players, because they are seeing that, you're bringing in college coaches. These guys on a first name basis, or you're pretty familiar with them. It gives them an opportunity to expose that. And then finally, hopefully, dadgum. This is a long PowerPoint. Sorry, folks. I'll try to skip over some of this. But team building, obviously is going to be essential with your teams. I'm terrible at team building, so this is where I bring my captains and my players in to come up with team building ideas, and also my assistants. I've just never been one of those big fuzzy guys. I recognize the importance of it. Believe me, I do, but it's never been my strength. So I bring in help when it comes to that. And a lot of, it's one of those things where I'm honest with myself on what my strengths and weaknesses are. Big weakness for me. So I ask for help when it comes to that. And then finally, your laundry list. What are your fundraisers? Do you do them? Are you allowed to do them? Are you going to have spirit wear for the players? Are you going to have a senior night? Are you going to have a community night, or a teacher night, or a middle school night, or something like that? Those are things that you have to have planned out so you can start the communications early on that. Do you run your own concessions? Or are those run for you, or is it just not even an option? Another big thing that we do are mentors for new parents. I kind of pair up some of my older, more experienced parents of my more experienced players, like a junior, senior, with a freshman or a sophomore or a newcomer parent. That way they can kind of hold their hand and teach them some of the expectations, and they're there to answer the questions, and it helps get more parent involvement. Again, define roles for parents. During our first Booster Club meeting, we give them a sheet. It's like, it's kind of a little checklist of what are the ones that you're interested in helping out on. We don't really give them an option on that. We say, here are 15 different things that we're going to be doing throughout the year. What are the ones that interest you? And that way we can get several people together with similar interests. And that way, it's not the same parents having to run everything over and over and over and over again. So, and then have your parents introduce themselves and their players at their meetings. I mean, everyone likes to be heard, whether they think they do or they don't, or whether you think they do or they don't. The parents like to be heard. Having them introduce themselves at meetings, that's just another way that you're getting just a small bit of buy-in from the parents. Once we hit our in season, again, here we go. It's a whole new role of crap that you have to have figured out. Again, we have our official tryout date that's posted there. Scrimmages. I loved it. I loved this past year, the way our scrimmages were set up by being able to have them earlier. It gave me a chance to see new players try different things, and try different lineups. It was fantastic. And the same scheduling guidelines for your scrimmages you had for games. There's not a set number of limit. There's no longer a set limit. We used to only be allowed to have 3 scrimmages. Now it's, you can do one during the week and one during the weekend. So, that Thursday, the first day, I'll have a scrimmage that Thursday, and I'll also have a scrimmage that Friday. Probably 2 different teams that are going to be going, or 2 different starting lineups that are going to be going, just because I'm not trying to kill the kids by doing back-to-back stuff, but I am taking advantage of that. And then finally, some of your fun little expectations and recommendations from your DECs and from UIL in terms of how many games you're allowed to have, when games actually start. So January 2nd this year, that'd be great. And then when you're allowed or not allowed to practice over break. Remember, you have to take off 5 consecutive days, including Christmas, and 3 of those days must include the 24th, 25th, and 26th of December. And then obviously check with your district to see if you guys have any additional rules on that one. Once you hit in season 2, so now we're starting to play games, folks, make sure you're updating your MaxPreps. I know in years past, and I'm sure this year, Tasco is going to try to put together our standings lists and things like that. But MaxPreps is already out there for us. I'd really recommend taking advantage of that and filling that out. If you make the playoffs, you have to have that filled out already anyway. And that's actually an expectation from UIL is that we're filling out MaxPreps. I'd say in a given year, I can look through MaxPreps and maybe a third to a half of the teams are actually filling out their games. Folks, that's not good. If a third to a half of our players weren't doing what was expected of them, we'd be pretty pissed. Well, we're coaches, we're the professionals. We need to be doing that as well. So make sure you're taking care of that. Team rankings come out. That's also part of MaxPreps, but that's also something Tasco puts out. Take advantage of that. I can't tell you how many times when I was a regional director, I get emails from coaches that's like, well, we beat this team and we beat this team. How come we're ranked so low? Well, you didn't vote. If you're not going to participate, it's kind of hard to get recognition. So, as a coach, advocate for your team, advocate for your players, participate. With that, talk to your local media, Dallas Morning News, Fort Worth Star-Telegram. I know Palestine has a good newspaper. Sulphur Springs, their newspaper is hot into soccer, at least it was in the past. Contact the media and get your kids recognition, get them out there. Same thing with the United Soccer Coaches weekly awards. You can give out weekly awards to your players. Those are things that they can put on college resumes. Keep your standing statistics updated. You're filming, continue your college prep. Be talking with college coaches. If you're in tournaments that are big tournaments, invite them out to watch them. When we had Shel Seidman on here about a month ago now, he talked about, coaches contacting the college coaches and how much that means to him that, hey, coaches were actually willing to reach out. So be an advocate for your player. Again, continue talking with your coach clubs. Have a booster club meeting, I'd say at least once a month, even if it's a small one or just a booster club board meeting. That way you're getting feedback from parents. Have you started your banquet? Are you going to have a banquet? What's that process look like? And then obviously doing our evaluations. Towards the tail end of the year, you have your awards, and it says advocate for your players and keep your parents off your back. There are lots of times in that, the awards get announced for Tasco for all regional, all state, and some parents will pop on there and they'll be there out there tweeting and retweeting. And so, well, our team made it to the regional finals, but we don't have any players on there. These are bogus, blah, 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 blah. And Tasco's not afraid to respond and said, you really need to be directing this at your coach who didn't nominate anybody. Again, that's your job as a coach. It costs you $45 to become a member of Tasco. And that's where our All-State and All-Region, and then also eventually All-American or All-Region for the nation and All-American awards come out of, are from Tasco. So be an advocate for your players. Now, something that I'd say on that, it says, make sure you go to your district awards and have statistics ready for your players and your opponents. Something that you see every once in a while, like our district, our coaches, we don't have much turnaround, so we're kind of all on the same page for this. But, I'm in a 10-team district, and I think I ended up 6th or 7th place. It might have been 7th place. I don't really have the right, well, I guess I have the right, but unless I have just an absolutely stellar player who's just ridiculously good and, star on the team and would be the star on every other team, I didn't put in for I didn't put any of my players in for a district MVP this year. My leading goal scorer had 9 goals. Almost every other team had at least 1 or 2 double-digit goal scorers. I didn't put in for an offensive player of the year this year. It kind of takes away from my credibility as a coach. If I'm putting up a player for every single opportunity, for every single district honor, it takes away from my credibility. If I was in dead last or if I was in 7th place and I think, oh, no, I have players for each one of these. No, I don't. I mean, if I did, we'd have won more games. We'd have been in 1st, 2nd, 3rd place. Or I did a crappy job as a coach. It's kind of one of those two type things there. So, be smart about that. Advocate for other coaches' players, and that's part of building a positive relationship with the other coaches. If you're that coach who's always yelling at other coaches and you have a terrible relationship with those coaches in your district, that's going to come out against your kids too. And your kids are going to be held accountable for that. If I'm always yelling at the opposing coaches and they hate me, my kids aren't going to get anything. And it's not that they're not voting for my kids, it's that they're not voting for me. And is that professional? No. Is that what we should be doing as coaches, taking out on the kids of coaches we don't like? No, it's not. But we're all people. It's the same thing when you're yelling at referees. they're people too. So if you're constantly hounding a referee or something like that, they're still people. So they may not purposely take something out on your kids, but they're going to. So down here, we just have a list of a lot of the district honors. That's what our district does. If your district does something different, fantastic. A couple minutes here, we open things up a little bit more to Q&A. Feel free to chime in on those. If you have questions also, feel free to chime in. Finally, Texas Girls Coaches Association, that's TGCA. They do an academic all-state, and that's obviously for girls only. And then they do Coach of the Year, and they do an Athlete of the Year. And then Texas High School Coaches Association, they do academic all-state in addition to a few other things. So get on there, but you need to be aware of the deadlines, because as I have on there in big and bold, because those deadlines can come up and bite you. We have our academic all-state through TASCO. This is probably the organization, if you're not a part of any of them, this is one you really need to be a part of. You have your academic all-state, that's for seniors, and generally what the criteria is seniors only if they had a 90 or above on a 100-point scale. Have fun figuring that out. Registrars love you for that. But it's also where we get our all-region and our all-state from. And those are things that can help with your All-American status and with college scholarships and things like that. Senior Showcase, hopefully we'll be able to have that at some point. We also vote on Coach and Assistant Coach of the Year, Referee of the Year, Sports Writer of the Year, and Senior Scholarships. But you need to be aware of the deadlines on those. Typically, TASCO's been very open to the idea of having to push those deadlines back. What has happened in the past is a lot of those deadlines get closed, second week of playoffs or something like that. And then, my team Warren's team makes it to the state tournament and he has a state MVP, and I can't add that stuff on. Well, the way TASCO works on this now is those deadlines for the players, that closes the Sunday or the Monday after the state tournament. So that way those coaches who have players who are all tournament are able to get that information in. But be an advocate for your player, and then get on and vote when it's time to vote. Finally, on this one, United Soccer Coaches Association, formerly NSCAA for old timers, they have their Players of the Week. Then they have their All-American and All-Region. I'm not going to lie, folks, this year, and I'm included in this one, we did a terrible job in the state of Texas of nominating players for All-Region and All-State. Now, that probably had a lot to do with COVID and deadlines getting pushed all over the place with stuff, especially with our TASCO awards. But when Coach Rodriguez sent it out for the boys that I had to vote on, I think there were only 6 kids that were nominated. I mean, you got to be kidding me. There should be, there could be 16 kids from a district that could get nominated for that. But I think we only had 6 or 7 kids on the boys side, and I'd have to talk to Stuart Brown about the girls side. I'm not sure there, but we did a really bad, and I'm included. We did a bad job of nominating our players, of being an advocate for our players. So that's something that we need to be aware of. Be aware of the national deadlines too, because if you were one of those coaches who's just good at paperwork and following timelines, there's a good chance you got an All-American player, even if you were dead last in the state. So, something to keep in mind. Is that the way it should go? No, probably not. But if that coach is paying attention and we're not, good for them. They also have their academic All-Americans, team sportsmanship awards. That has to do with cards and sportsmanship, obviously. Senior excellence awards and team academic awards. There's a lot of awards out there. And yes, I know it's a day and age of where everyone gets a trophy and all that fun stuff. But the bottom line is, the NSCAA or United Soccer Coaches Award and TASCO awards, those are awards that colleges actually look at, since colleges, NCAA is aligned with United Soccer Coaches. So if they're an All-American through United Soccer Coaches, that's something that colleges will pay attention to. They're a 2-time All-American. Well, that might be a kid I need to look at, especially when, everyone and their mom's getting an All-Region or All-State in Utah or something like that. So something to be aware of there. Finally, closing down here a little bit. With postseason, do you keep your graduating seniors? Do they have to stay? Like for us, it's a class, and and we're not allowed to let them out. So that kind of sucks for us, because the seniors, I love my seniors, but I also want to start working on next year's stuff. And honestly, my graduating seniors after the season's over, they can become a distraction. They're done. So I have defined roles for them. You guys are responsible for this. You guys are responsible for that. I'll walk them through and essentially just give them an old United Soccer Coaches 11v11 diploma, and I'd have them start coming up with practice plans, and I'd have them start coaching the players and stuff like that, where where they're starting to get a look at from the coaching role. And that way, since they're busy, they're not being a pain in the butt. I do our postseason evaluations. Like I said, I love doing Google Forms for this because it gets all my data around really, really quickly. But it gives us feedback on how things went and things that we need to adjust. I do take player input to an extent. If it's a turd kid who's always a turd and it's just, I just hate everything we did and I hate coaching, blah, blah, blah. Okay, I get that. But it could be a turd kid who brings up a good point. The reason I don't like coach is this, or the reason I didn't like doing this is this. Well, just because you don't like the person doesn't mean you shouldn't like their input. I mean, take advantage of it and learn to be flexible. Like it says, great time for finding future leaders. More college readiness. This is a great time again to have the college coaches come in and speak. I'm not sure if NCAA, I'm not sure if D1 went through with their spring season yet or not, or how things are looking for that, but the coaches love coming in and have a look at them, and it's a great time for them to fill out some of their recruiting stuff. I can't tell you how many emails and text messages I get. It's like, hey, our signing day in February, we were expecting on getting X, Y, and Z, and we didn't get it. Do you have anybody available? Yeah. Or, hey, I'm starting to look at next year's crop. Do you have anyone? And then, yeah, I do. And why don't you come in and talk to some of these players? And then they've got their rules on who they can talk to and who they can't, or whether it's a group session or not. But it's one of those things where, they're able to get in front and they're trying to sell their program just as much as you're trying to sell your kids. So, again, bringing those college coaches in is great. Obviously, a new time to implement ideas. And it's, hey, we worked on this all year long and it was absolutely terrible. What can we do to replace it? Finally, when we come into the summer, check our UIL changes, and that's ongoing, especially this summer. Every year they change something, and it might be something that's small for you, but it might be big for you as well. Again, summertime is a great time to do your coaching education stuff. Typically what we like to do, there's some of us, when we'll talk through USSF and United Soccer Coaches, and we like to bring in for a high school diploma. We did that last year. We are trying to do something else this year. Obviously, COVID shut things down for face-to-face type stuff, but realize that your Tasco folks are trying to bring in and trying to offer you summer stuff. Obviously, you're sitting here on and listen to me be long-winded. You're trying to better yourself, so that's fantastic. And then obviously, finally, rest and recharge. Take a break. You need to recharge your batteries just like the kids do. So make sure you're doing that. On here. More your soccer specific organizations there. Feel free to read through that. I'll email Warren the PowerPoint here so you can go through and have a look at these organizations and their websites and some of the things that they're offering. I don't feel I really need to read that to you anymore. And then for me, that's it.
Hey, Fred.
Yes, sir. How are you? Hey, Coach.
Man, my 4-year-old's chasing me with no clothes on, so I don't know.
That's awesome.
Hey, you were talking about the club. The Vegas tournament's always right there, like preseason stuff. So since day one, man, I'm very similar to you, where I make my school the priority when it's our season, and so I've been kind of not hurt, but I had a couple ECNL kids, or actually one, who went to Vegas, and I suspended him for 2 games because he missed a game for that. So he missed that game, and then I suspended him for the next game.
Yep.
And so I didn't know how – is that something that, when you talk to a club coach, do you kind of let them know, like, what kind of your expectation are?
I do. And I'm not going to lie, my expectations changed over time. I've become a bit more lenient, to be honest with you, on that stuff. Because for the one Vegas tournament, like Vegas has like 5 of them in a row, but the one that we're all familiar with, or the Disney one, or the big ECNL ones too now. I've grown to make exceptions for that. There's still consequences that are involved in there, but I used to do like a 3-for-1. Oh, you're going to miss one of my games for club. You're out for the next 3 for us. Over time, I've kind of lessened on that. I still, for my players for Disney, since it's still our preseason, there's no suspension for me there. And for I'll let the players know, like if it's a College Cup tournament or it's a Vegas tournament, there will be a suspension when you get back, but it's partial suspension, but it's also partial because you need to get your legs back under you. We're not trying to drain you. So kind of explain why and explain the part about commitment. And it's like, you make that decision. Now, if it's my kid, I player with Dallas Cup that I suspended for a playoff game several years ago. Some coaches won't even do that. They'll let them play in the Dallas Cup game that day and then come out and play in the playoffs. That's your choice. But for me, I didn't do that. And it probably cost us, but we're in season. But I've changed on that over time, and I do talk with the coaches. And the nice thing now is a lot of the coaches that my kids play for are also high school coaches, so they get it too. Like an Oscar Borgarella with SC Dallas or something like that. Well, he's JJ Pierce's girls coach, so he kind of he takes things into account. Now, if it's junior year, again, since that's a lot of the time for those showcases, it's not that I look the other way, but I do have different rules for junior year. And I also had to make exceptions for a national team player too. Kid got called to national team practice and missed 3 games. Okay, he's playing for the country. Yeah, he's playing for the country. I'm not suspending you. Sorry, that's national team. But that's a rule I kind of just made up as a joke, and then it ended up coming to fruition. But since I already had it in place, nobody questioned me on that one. They didn't question why this kid, why did he get to leave for 3 games and then come back and play in the next one? Well, I had that rule in place. If you get called away for a national team, then okay, you're playing for the country. I don't care.
Yeah. Bring me a shirt back.
Yeah, essentially. So making a long answer longer, I've changed the way I've done stuff over time. I communicate with the coaches the best I can over time. But if you come out and you tell players that this is XYZ, well, you can't make an exception on that one. So,
well, that's kind of how it was with Dallas Cup, because my first couple of years at Mesquite, we were making the playoffs, but my best player, or one of my best players, was missing the first playoff game like 2 years in a row. And I was like questioning myself, like, hey man, should you even be playing? Like, there's no point to play all this other time, and then when it really matters, you're not here. Like, that doesn't –
That's what my argument has been in the past is I'd rather have you not play than have you play and then we get knocked out in the first round because we were relying on you and you weren't there.
Exactly.
I'd rather I want to play with the team that's going to get us there. That I want to play with the team that's going to go there. But other coaches had different philosophies, and that's fine. That's just how I came up with it.
And then my last question, man, I'm sorry to keep you so long. When you just said one of your clubs has like 9 players on one team, what does your practice look like? Because, I mean, I have a club like that here in Rockwall that had about 8 of my players, and the coach came to me and he wanted to really work out like hey, if we have a hard practice that night, can you have a light practice at school? And I was kind of like, I don't know. It don't really work like that, man. And then, I don't sit out. I think it's really hard for me if I was like, hey, you 8 guys, y'all are kind of over there. Like, you're good, relax. You got practice. And then I work with my other guys. I feel like that sends like a really bad message.
That's what I used to do. I changed that up a little bit now. I like if they do have games, like, and generally if my players are playing club, their fitness level is generally way better than my players who aren't. So some of the things that I'm doing with some of the players, those players with a higher fitness level that we found through testing and just through know-how, that I differentiate. I'm just like you do in the classroom. When I have kids who are sitting out of practice because they got that game coming up that night or that day, I don't have them just sit on the sideline and kick the ball back and forth. So those, like, they're still going to be active and involved in some way. Now, they're not going to have the running component to it, but like if I have like wall players or something like that, fine. They can go shag the balls. They can help with the keepers. I do have roles for those players, so they're still involved in the practice and they're not just sitting there screwing around. I've never had a club coach come to me and say, hey, we have a hard practice. Can you go light? I haven't had that. I'm sure lots of other folks have, but I have had them come and say, hey, we're playing the Texans. We're playing FC Dallas. We're playing Solar Chelsea tomorrow. Can you sit my child or can you sit these kids so that they've got legs? And yes, I will. I'll have them do something different, but when you have some players who who aren't playing club or aren't playing at a high level, and they're like, well, why does Timmy get to sit out? It's like, well, he's playing club or he's playing at a higher level. I'm not going to treat you I'm not going to treat you all the exact same, but I am going to treat you fairly. Mm-hmm. He's a higher level player. If that kid can run a 5-minute mile, he doesn't need to do fitness after practice like you do when you're coming in 7.5 minutes. Why does he have to, he's already fit. it's kind of the same thing. So.
Yes, sir. I appreciate it, man.
That's where I'm at, bud. So, and folks, chime in if you got other ways of looking at the situation, because I know my way is the way I do it, but it's not necessarily the right way. So,
hey, I appreciate your time too, Fred, on this. Hey, just to kind of give a plug for next week, we've got Gary Williamson's going to be on with Principles of Play. So I'm really looking forward and excited to do it. On the same plug, if you know somebody that would like to give a session, you know, we're open to different presenters and different things. I think we're right now scheduled through August 8th, but after that, you know, we got other people jumping in. Everybody in the group has something to share. Everybody's got something they can do that would help the collective whole, and that's kind of what TASCO's about. So that being said, if you have somebody or know somebody, or you yourself want to do it, please reach out to us and we'll get you on this thing as well.